doing today? We're trying to survive here. We're doing pretty good so far. Another day, another episode. I'm going to try to get an episode every day during this whole mess. For those who can't keep up, I apologize. I'll probably come to a time I don't have the time to make so many, but for now I got the time. So I'm just trying to do my part to help those who enjoy watching a little bit about jazz every day. And I try to keep it about jazz as much as possible. Fear doesn't need to be part of every moment of our day. So anyway, I appreciate you all for subscribing. We're getting closer and closer to 1,000 subscribers. I feel the content of this channel is helping it keep it and growing, and I'm glad to see there's so many people out there thirsty for insight into jazz beyond what pressing is it, and how many grams was your vinyl, and where was the jacket made. Like, I like to talk about the music itself and the feelings and the background, what's behind it. And I said before, if you have a Tom Sawyer book club and all you guys are talking about is the paper and the binding and which edition you own, you're kind of missing that story. We're talking ABC Records today. ABC is, of course, a part of Paramount Film, and they decide in '55 to launch a record label, and it starts at 100, the series, and it's fairly jazz heavy. The first 200-300 titles. Creed Taylor comes over somewhere here in the middle of that run and starts steering the record and the jazz to even a better place. Some great stuff is made. And then he convinces ABC to launch Impulse, which at that point most of the real jazz titles on ABC will stay on the Impulse label, and ABC becomes more about soul and lounge and real soft jazz. And I'll show you a few examples of that as we get to the end of this episode. Right now we're listening to the great Lucky Thompson, a guy who, of course, plays with Miles on Walkin', a guy who has a couple records. We saw one on Dawn Records, a guy who spent a lot of time in France. This is with Oscar Pettiford, the great bass player. Lucky's a fantastic player. I wonder who's on the trombone here. Jim, what's my name? Jim, what's my name? Is that gonna be Jimmy Cleveland? It sounds. That's my first thought. Was that Jimmy Cleveland? But I don't know if he was on an ABC ever. But that would make sense for him not using his last name here. It's with Ozzie Johnson, Oscar Pettiford, Hank Jones, and Lucky Thompson. So boy, you got really a pretty incredible group there. And if you have Jones, Pettiford, and Johnson, it's gonna swing and swing hard. Lucky's a great player, real expressive guy. And for those of you who don't know Jimmy Cleveland, I'm not even positive that was him. But if you don't know Jimmy Cleveland, Jimmy is one of the baddest trombone players you never heard of. He makes a few records at Emercy, and he's a sideman on absolutely hundreds of records, I swear. I see that name show up. Oscar Pettiford, the aforementioned bass player, also makes a couple of records at Bethlehem. And he was an important force at ABC, apparently. He dies quite young, sadly. But he was one of the guys who started to innovate on the bass, make it more of a lead instrument. Really jumped and shouted when he played. A real powerful, expressive guy. And here, of course, he's playing with Lucky, which it was like two of ABC's linchpins, and probably two of the reasons why they were sure doing a record label is a smart idea. Oscar Pettiford makes another record here. This one's actually more of a Lucky. Well, it's both. But anyway, Oscar Pettiford makes a solo record here. And this has a great group on it. He has two of them. And like G.G. Grice is in this. Art Farmer, I thought so. Tommy Flanagan, Julius Watkins, Ozzie Johnson. It's pretty incredible stuff. But you see early on in the 100 series, you're getting a lot of Pettiford, Lucky Thompson. These are going to be the African Americans that ABC Paramount is recording. I think it's a West Coast thing, being the film studios and all that. And so, I don't need to put that on. But again, you can see the group on there. There's a lot of real name players in Oscar's big band there. And they record some pretty outstanding stuff. Now, oddly enough, during the Bethlehem 10-inch 1000 series, Oscar Pettiford has a couple records as a bass player, and Vinnie Burke got a couple 10 inches as a bass player. And you go to ABC, Oscar Pettiford has a couple records as a leader, and Vinnie Burke has a number of records as a leader, as a bass player. I think he's got another one I didn't pull out, but Jimmy is a great player. Here he's playing with Al Cohn, Jimmy Rainey, Eddie Costa, Joe Puma, Joe Morello, and Irby Green. So there's not really integration going on. If you look at the Oscar Pettiford record, that group was all black and all cooked. And if you look at this Vinnie Burke record from the same year, that's an entirely white group. And so I guess they're being a little bit conservative with how they're going to integrate their bands. And it just tells you what the times that we were in. It's just kind of a crazy thing. I think it's hard for us to really get our head around it sometimes. And we all know these guys were all playing together in the after hours bars. You know, a lot of the clubs, they weren't even integrated at this point in the 50s, but the musicians would jam together after hours. Don Elliott is a guy that has a number of titles at Riverside. In 54, 55, 56, he's at Riverside. He's a 10-inch or two and a number of LPs. And Don Elliott's one of the real talented guys that people don't know about. He's a great trumpet player, a great vibe player. He was a great singer. He also plays other instruments as well. He shows up later doing a lot of voices and television stuff from what I remember. But his records on Riverside are great. And his titles here at ABC are also fantastic. Here he is singing again, which just like at Riverside, he does one with the trumpet, one with a vibe, and then he does one where he's a singer, and he does all things really well. A truly multi-dimensional player is Don Elliott, and a guy you shouldn't pass up. You see those records for $4, $5, $6, $8 in a bin, Don Elliott records will be pleasing to you. You will dig them. The toughest record to find on ABC, at least in terms of anything jazz-wise, and it's a tough one to find and not cheap. It's this great Kenny Dorham record, and it's one where I had to go to Japan eventually for it, because I wasn't going to pay $300 for it. Kenny Dorham with the Jazz Prophets. I think it says Volume 1 on there, but there is no Volume 2. But it does clearly indicate ABC was willing to record black artists, so good for them, because a lot of their other West Coast counterparts, and I shouldn't assume this is West Coast, ABC could have had their jazz division in New York, but anyway, a lot of the other labels of their style weren't as integrated. Capitol certainly wasn't, and ABC launches from a barely big stage right off the bat because of the film company, so they go from being not an entity to being a fairly national label real quickly, which a label like Blue Note, Prestige, Argo, they never had that luxury. Another great white tenor player is Zoot Sims. He has a number of records here on the fantastic ABC label. Here's another one where he plays alto, tenor, and baritone. Number 155, what was this one? Number 198. So we're still in the first 100 records here at ABC. And there's been a lot of really good stuff coming out. Real solid jazz, no compromising. Billy Taylor is a bit of an underappreciated guy. He goes back to the probably late 40s, and he's definitely around in the early 50s. And he makes a lot of records for a lot of labels. And whether he's at Prestige, Riverside, here at ABC, Billy Taylor is making really solid, really swinging records. And I'm surprised more people don't dig Billy Taylor. He makes a number of records here at ABC. A great album cover there. This is the My Fair Lady one, which gets reissued at Impulse. Remember, they're affiliated. Here's Billy Taylor introduces Ira Sullivan, a great Chicago trumpet player, if I recall. Again, my mind, I'm getting old. One more Billy Taylor at the London House. So you can see he was pretty prolific in his recordings. A guy I love, who I thought was French, but turns out he's Belgian, was my mistake. I apologize, Mr. Belgique. Mr. Jimmy Rainey. He's one of the great guitar players in jazz. He makes at least 3 records for ABC here. Number 129, number 167. If I recall, this one's really early, 109. So this one's real early in the discography. And this one actually has 4 of my favorite players on it. Jimmy Rainey, Chuck Wayne, who has a great record at Savoy, Joe Puma, who we've talked about having stuff on Bethlehem, on Jubilee, and then Dick Garcia, who has a great record on Dawn. These are all 4 great white guitar players that are all fantastic players, and here they're all kind of trading off licks on what's a really cool record with a nice album cover. ABC has a fairly decent art department. It's not going to rival Blue Note, but then again, no record label really rivals Blue Note in the art departments. Reed Miles' album covers were just so great. This record to me by Art Farmer is number 200, so it's probably 58, 59. And to me, it's a clear-cut example of Monkey See, Monkey Do. And whether it was Art Farmer's idea or the label's idea, Gil Evans and Miles Davis were having great success with orchestral trumpet fusion jazz. So if you're an executive at ABC and you have an Art Farmer on your label, you say, you know what, Art? Last time when we were in love, last time we were young, sorry, let's do a record with some strings and some horns. Let's see if we can tap into that Gil Evans sound. And I think if you listen to this without that context, you can be like, this is a little schmaltzy. But if you think of it in the time frame and how they're saying, okay, if Miles can do it, we can do it, they're absolutely right. And this is as good as Porgy and Bess. It's as good as Miles Ahead. Well, maybe not that one, but it's a great record. And Art's a great player. Art's really wonderful emoter, and I love a lot of what he shares with us. To me, he's a fairly positive guy, unlike Chet Baker and Miles, who both seem to have a lot of melancholy and bitterness and addiction. Our Chet Baker part. Art's more positive fella. Quincy Jones. Mr. Quincy Jones makes a couple records here early on ABC, 149 and 186. And he very early on is making it clear that he's going to be a force to be reckoned with. He's one of the great composers and arrangers in jazz, and he tackles anything and everything. And of course, by the 70s, he's making Michael Jackson, the Brothers Johnson, Chaka Khan Rufus records that are George Benson's Give Me the Night, those funk disco masterpieces. Quincy's, of course, the orchestrator of all that. But early on, he plays trumpet. He does a lot of arranging. And when he first shows up on the scene, guys have been around for decades, like Sonny Stitt, are borrowing his arrangements. So this is before he goes to Mercury, which he goes there to Mercury and makes a long series of records that are also very, very jazz records. And so now we're going to take a little jump forward because Impulse is created, and even artists that are on Impulse are going to make records at ABC, the parent, and the stuff that's going to be on ABC post Impulse's creation is going to be this poppier. We love Johnny Hartman, and I still love this record, but this sounds a lot different than what he does with Coltrane or Since I Just Dropped By to Say Hello. This is much more, here you go, White America. This is Nat Coley, you'll like this. We airbrush his face, so he's pretty light skinned. You won't be too uncomfortable with this, America. So you gotta dig Johnny Hartman always, but just that's a clear example of how different ABC is once Impulse comes into the picture, and it makes sense. It's good. I think it's good to separate your genres under different labels and sequences. And then the one thing you can't go into ABC without talking about is the great Ray Charles. Betty Carter is also a great singer, but Ray Charles comes over from Atlantic probably in 62, 63, I'm guessing. He comes over to ABC, and Ray Charles records on the ABC label are just outstanding. And when he's on Atlantic, he's doing kind of R&B stuff and jazz stuff. When he goes to ABC, he goes to kind of more R&B soul. And by the 70s, he's making some of the great, beautiful soul records that have ever been made. But all his stuff on ABC is worth having, Ray Charles. And again, it's gotten away from the jazz because it's a later in ABC's history. But you can't talk ABC records and not talk about the great Ray Charles. And like I said, anything Ray does on ABC or Atlantic is must-have stuff. It's always going to be great. And you don't have to have all of them, but you should buy them when you see them. Buy them when you see them. Ray Charles is always worth having in your collection. So again, that's the ABC Records that's affiliated with Impulse. They do a lot of great stuff early on. If you find the Kenny Dorham record, buy it. 100%. Thank you all for watching and subscribing to my channel. You all stay safe out there. I'll talk to you all soon. Peace.